This story happened a couple of years ago, during the clown epidemic that was spreading all across the United States. Most of you probably remember it. Back in 2016, there was countless reports of people dressing up as killer clowns and going around scaring kids and random people in public. At first it started as a stupid prank, but eventually some people began taking it way too far. There were videos online of clowns carrying machetes, chainsaws, and knives. Some were even chasing people through parks and neighborhoods. At the time of this story, I was 16 years old, and weirdly enough, I actually wanted to see one of those killer clowns. I know that sounds crazy now, but I didn't believe any of it. I thought the entire thing was just a huge internet hoax or people exaggerating stories for attention. That was until the night of the fair. It was a warm evening for late October when my town hosted its annual fall fair. The fair was always a huge deal for us because there was literally nothing else to do where we lived. I swear we had to be living in one of the most boring towns in the entire country. My plan was to go around 8 p.m., right when the sun started setting. Everyone knew the fair was way better at night when all the lights came on. I called two of my friends, who I'll call Steve and Jaden for privacy reasons, and told them the plan. They were both down immediately. After school that day, they came over to my house and we just hung out for a couple of hours until it started getting dark. Eventually we headed out on foot. The fairgrounds were only about 10 minutes from my house, so the walk there wasn't bad at all. When we arrived, the place was already packed. Music was blasting from different rides, kids were running around everywhere, and the smell of fried food was in the air. We walked straight to the ticket booth and bought ride passes. My goal was to go on as many rides as possible, but there was one attraction I was especially interested in. A clown-themed haunted house. It was implemented this year. Since Halloween was right around the corner, the fair organizers had decided to add a haunted attraction for the first time that year. A lot of parents had actually complained about the idea because of the clown epidemic that had been happening, but we honestly didn't care. If anything, it made us more excited. The first ride we went on was the Ferris wheel, mainly because we wanted to take pictures of the entire fair from the top. When our cart finally reached the very top, the ride paused for a moment. From up there, we could see the entire fairgrounds glowing with lights. In the distance, the clown haunted house stood out from everything else. It was designed to look like an old 2-story house, covered in giant clown decorations and flashing red lights. Jaden pointed down at it. "That actually looks pretty cool, bro," he said. Steve nodded. "Yeah, that's definitely the creepiest thing here." I turned to them and asked, "You guys want to go straight there after this?" They both agreed immediately. Once the ride started moving again and we got off, we headed straight towards the haunted house. Standing in front of it honestly gave me chills. There was a huge poster of a clown face stretched across the front of the building, with exaggerated teeth and glowing red eyes. 2 workers dressed as clowns stood near the entrance scanning tickets. But the creepiest part wasn't any of that. It was the upstairs window. There was a clown standing there. He wasn't moving. He was just staring directly at me. Something about it felt off, to say the least. Normally, actors in haunted houses are supposed to jump out and scare people, but this guy wasn't doing anything. He was just standing there in the window, watching. Still, I tried to brush it off. I walked up to the entrance and handed our passes to the workers. One of the clowns scanned them and gestured for us to go inside. Before we entered, the other clown explained something. "If you get too scared, just clap your hands," he said through the mask. "That signals the actors to stop and escort you out." We nodded and stepped inside. The moment we entered, I could hear creepy carnival-style music playing faintly through the house. The hallway was dimly lit with flashing lights and fog machines. It honestly felt pretty convincing. We had barely taken 10 steps when a clown suddenly jumped out from behind a stack of boxes and screamed in our faces. All 3 of us jumped. The clown laughed and disappeared into another hallway. We kept moving. A few more jump scares happened as we made our way through the first floor. After a couple minutes, we reached the staircase that led up to the second floor. I went up first, but the moment I turned the corner at the top of the stairs, I froze. Standing in the hallway was a clown. He was blocking the entire path. It was the same clown I had seen in the upstairs window earlier. He was just standing there, and he was staring at us. In his hand, he was holding a machete, At first I thought it was fake, but something about it didn't look like a prop. Steve whispered nervously, I thought they weren't allowed to have weapons. That's what the sign outside said, Jaden replied quietly. Trying to stay calm, Jaden spoke up. Sir, we just need to get through. We'll just pass by you. The clown didn't move. Instead, he slowly raised the machete into the air, like he was about to swing it. My heart started pounding. I quickly clapped my hands, remembering what the worker had told us. Nothing happened. The clown didn't react, he just kept staring at us. That's when I realized something was seriously wrong. Run! The second I said that, the clown charged at us. We turned and sprinted down the stairs as fast as we could. I could hear heavy footsteps behind us as we ran through the first floor and burst out the front exit. We didn't stop running until we reached a nearby security area. Completely out of breath, we told the guard everything that had just happened. At first he looked skeptical, but when he saw how shaken we were, he took it seriously. He walked us back to the haunted house and called over the manager. We described the clown in as much detail as we could. We told him the costume he was wearing, the mask, and the machete he was holding. As we were talking, the manager's expression slowly changed. His eyes widened. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. There's no one working here that's dressed like that. For a moment, none of us said anything. That's when it hit me. Someone had snuck into the haunted house dressed like a clown. And because of the clown epidemic happening at the time, no one questioned it. The security guard immediately shut down the attraction and searched the entire building. But the worst part is they never found him. To this day, I still have no idea who that person was or what his intentions were. But one thing I know for sure is that if we hadn't run when we did, that night at the fair could have ended a lot worse. I work as a home inspector in Atlanta, Georgia. Over the years, I've completed well over 1,000 home and building inspections. As a home inspector, I see houses of all kinds. Old, new, pristine, falling apart, and even homes that haven't been built yet. If it's a home, chances are I've inspected something like it. Most of my work is in Atlanta and the surrounding metro area. The oldest house in Atlanta itself is the Joseph Willis House, built in the 1840s, and it still stands at its original location today. The oldest structure I've personally inspected was an old church built sometime in the late 1800s, but the house this story is about was built in the early 1900s. If you're not familiar with crawl spaces beneath houses, consider yourself lucky. A crawl space is a small area underneath a house, usually just dirt, used for things like HVAC systems, water heaters, plumbing, or storage. Depending on how well the homeowner maintains it, the dirt floor might be covered in plastic and relatively clean. But most crawl spaces are the opposite. Spiderwebs everywhere, bugs crawling around, standing pools of water, the wooden flooring above you often coated in mold. The house I was inspecting that day had been sitting vacant for quite a while. The crawl space was filled with discarded trash and an extremely old furnace or boiler, depending on where you're from. To make matters worse, this crawl space was extremely low. I'm a pretty big guy, and moving around down there was difficult. Some crawl spaces are tall enough to stand in, but most require you to crawl the entire time. Before I went under the house, my clients asked me to check a few specific things in the crawl space. Once they were finished, I squeezed myself through the small entrance. I had my headlamp on, a breathing mask, and what I call my crawl space suit, which is basically just a mechanic's suit. About 6 minutes into crawling around, taking photos, avoiding puddles, and checking the foundation, my headlamp suddenly went out. One of my biggest fears while crawling under the house is the idea of the structure shifting and trapping me underneath. So when the light went out, it was pitch black. In my mind, I was already imagining the house collapsing down on top of me. I tried turning the light back on several times. The stupid thing had a habit of dying at the worst possible moments. After a moment of fiddling with my headlamp, the light finally flickered back on. And right in front of me, illuminated by the beam, was a stone well. I could have sworn it hadn't been there before. This was a small house, and the size of the crawl space usually reflects the size of the house itself. From where I had been crawling, I could practically see the entire space. It made no sense that I would have missed something like that. Still, curiosity got the better of me. Before I could even take a picture, I heard something. A voice. "Help me." The voice sounded distant, tired, almost ghostly. At first I thought I was imagining things. Then I heard it again. "Help me. I'm in the well. Please." My heart started pounding. I quickly crawled towards the well. The area around it had just enough clearance for me to kneel. I leaned over the edge, bracing my hands against the cold, damp stone. My headlamp shined down into the well. It was about 15 feet deep. At the bottom was only about a foot of water, and sitting there was a boy. He had dark hair and was wearing what looked like old-fashioned pajamas. Clutched in his arms was a soaked stuffed animal. I couldn't even tell what kind of animal it used to be. It was too deteriorated. "How'd you get down there?" I asked. The boy just looked up at me and said again, "Help me, please." I yelled that I'd be right back. Without thinking, I tossed my headlamp down towards him and switched to using the flashlight on my inspection phone. Then I turned and started crawling out of the crawl space as fast as I could. When I finally squeezed back outside, the client saw me and chuckled at how filthy I looked. They asked how things looked under the house. I shouted for them to call 911. "There's a boy trapped in a well under the house." They stared at me in complete confusion. They had no idea there was a well under the house. Still, they started dialing. I ran to my truck and grabbed the rope I always keep in there and an extra headlamp and ran back to the crawl space entrance. Then I dove back inside. I crawled as fast as I could, but the floor jolts kept slamming into my back. I could hear sirens in the distance, hopefully coming for us. But as I crawled, the faster I moved, the more dust and dirt I kicked up into the crawl space. Soon I couldn't see anything, not even a foot in front of me. I couldn't even tell where the well was anymore. I called out into the darkness, "Hey, where are you? Hello?" Suddenly a bright light pierced through the dust. Someone shouted, "Fire department, coming in." 3 firefighters crawled towards me, carrying rescue equipment. They asked where the boy was, and I told them he was in the well. Now there were 4 of us under the house, and the dust only got worse. Eventually we all slowed down and waited for the dirt in the air to settle. And once it finally cleared enough for us to see, we started looking for the well. But there wasn't one. Not anywhere. We could see the entire crawl space clearly. There was no well, no opening in the ground, no place big enough to kneel, nothing. I was completely stunned. The 4 of us searched the crawl space thoroughly before crawling back out. There was absolutely nothing in there. I was adamant about what I saw. The well, the boy, the cold stone beneath my hands. The police eventually told me that before calling 911, I needed to be absolutely certain about what I was reporting. That was the first and only paranormal experience I've ever had. Now I finally understand what people mean when they describe something was truly eerie. Ever since that day, whenever I enter a house for an inspection, I quietly apologize to anything that might be there for invading its space. I tell it I'll be leaving shortly. I've never seen anything like that again, and I hope that whoever or whatever was sitting at the bottom of that well eventually found peace. Because after I threw my headlamp down to him, I never found it again. It was 8:03 p.m. when I saw him for the first time. I was 12. It was spring break, and I was staying over at my grandma's house like I did every year. Back then, spring break meant freedom. No school, no homework, just late night TV, junk food, and falling asleep on the couch, while my grandma watched TV in her recliner. She lived in a quiet neighborhood, the kind where nothing ever happens. Big houses, trimmed lawns, and porch lights always on. That's why I knew something was wrong the second I saw him. I was standing at the front window, moving the blinds just enough to see outside. At first I thought he was just another neighbor out for a walk. But he wasn't walking past the house, he was circling it slowly. He'd walk up the sidewalk, pause near the driveway, then turn and walk back the other way. Over and over, hands in his pocket, head slightly down, like he was thinking or waiting. "Grandma," I said quietly, "there's a guy outside." She didn't panic at first. She just came over and peeked through the blinds. Her entire expression changed. "That's not anyone from around here," she whispered. We watched him for another minute. He stopped near the mailbox and just stood there, facing the house. I remember the way the streetlight hit his face. He wasn't old, maybe late 20s, scruffy beard, hoodie pulled tight around his head. And he wasn't looking at the street, he was looking at the windows. At us. Grandma grabbed the phone and called the police. They showed up within 10 minutes, 2 squad cars. Lights flashing red and blue across the houses like something out of a movie. They searched the street, checked backyards, even walked through the side yards with flashlights. Nothing. The man was gone. One of the officers knocked on the door before leaving. Probably just someone passing through, he said. But call us again if you see anything. I remember thinking, that didn't feel like someone just passing through. That night, my grandma double locked every door and window. She set the alarm system, something she rarely did unless she was going out of town. She even turned off the living room lamp so no one could see inside. By 10:30 p.m., we went to bed. Her room was at the front of the house, and mine was down the hallway near the back. And that's where things got worse. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the way he was staring at the house. Around midnight, I finally started drifting off. Then I heard it. Footsteps, soft, slow, right outside my bedroom window. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but then I heard gravel crunch. My heart started pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. I sat up in bed and held my breath. Silence. Then, the sound of glass shattering exploded through the house. I froze. For half a second, everything was quiet again. Then the alarm system went off. The loudest, most violent beeping I'd ever heard. I felt like the walls were shaking. I heard my grandma scream from her room. I ran into the hallway and she was already there, clutching her phone. "He's inside," she kept saying. "He's inside." I heard the back door slam closed. All of that commotion must have scared the man off. Later we found out exactly what happened. He had come back. He smashed a small glass window on the back door, reached his hand through the broken opening, and unlocked it from the inside. He actually opened the door. That's when the alarm triggered, and that's the only reason he didn't make it fully inside. He didn't know the police were already parked just a few streets over, finishing paperwork from earlier. The sirens hit almost instantly. Red and blue lights flooded through the windows again. When officers came in, guns drawn, they cleared every room. They told us to stay upstairs while they searched the neighborhood. They found him 2 houses down, trying to hide in someone's bushes. I didn't see him when they put him in the back of the cruiser, but my grandma did. She said he wasn't panicked, he was smiling. The next day we found something that still makes my stomach turn. Behind the house, near the bedroom window, there were footprints in the dirt. Multiple sets. He hadn't just walked by once, he had been there for a while, watching, waiting for us to sleep. That spring break was supposed to be fun. It was supposed to be safe. Instead, it was the first time I realized how thin a locked door really is. And sometimes the only thing standing between you and someone who wants inside is the alarm going off at the right time. If the police hadn't still been nearby, I don't know what would have happened, and I don't think I want to. We lived on the second floor of a small apartment building, tucked behind a line of trees. Not deep woods, just enough to block the streetlights and make the back of the building feel cut off from the rest of the world. That night, it was just the 2 of us. No TV, no music. Just a low hum of the heaters kicking on and off. It was late enough that everything outside had gone quiet, the kind of quiet where even small sounds feel out of place. I was half asleep when my girlfriend whispered my name. At first, I thought she was just shifting in bed. Then she whispered it again, this time sharper. "Do you see that?" I opened my eyes annoyed, and that's when I noticed the light. It wasn't steady, it wasn't random reflections. It was a beam, slow, deliberate, moving across the wall of our bedroom. A flashlight. The light slid over the curtains, disappeared, then came back again, higher this time, like whoever was holding it was adjusting their grip. I sat up, heart already pounding, and pulled the curtains back just enough to look outside. That's when I saw him, A man stood behind our building, near the edge of the trees. He was holding a flashlight at chest level, sweeping it across the second floor windows, including ours. He took a few slow steps, stopping every couple of feet to shine the light upward. When the beam hit our window again, I dropped the curtain immediately. We both froze. Neither of us said anything, but we could hear him now. Footsteps crunching slowly over leaves and gravel, moving closer to the building. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he dropped something. Maybe he lived nearby. Then we heard the sound of something brushing against the siding. A faint scraping noise, slow, careful. I checked my phone. No missed calls, no alerts. It was past midnight. The flashlight disappeared from view. For a moment, I felt relief. Maybe he'd walked off. Maybe we were overreacting. It was soft, almost polite. It came from the window. We stared at each other in disbelief. We were on the second floor. No balcony, no fire escape, nothing beneath the window but empty space. I held my breath, hoping I'd imagined it. 3 quiet knocks this time. My girlfriend grabbed my arm, hard enough to hurt. I could feel her shaking. My chest felt tight, like my body knew something my brain didn't want to accept. Someone was outside our window. I forced myself to stand, every instinct screaming at me not to, and moved slowly towards the window. The tapping stopped. I pulled the curtain back in one sharp motion. Nothing. No face, no hands, no flashlight beam. Just darkness, and the outline of the tree swaying slightly in the wind. I leaned closer, scanning up and down, side to side. Still nothing. No movement, no sound. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. Right below the window, pressed against the siding, was a faint smudge, like dirt or a shoe print. Right where someone would brace themselves if they were standing on something. But there was nothing there. No ladder, no boxes, no ledge. Which meant whatever, or whoever, had been outside our window didn't need help staying there. We backed away from the window and locked ourselves in the bathroom, the only room without windows. I called the police with shaking hands, trying to explain something that already sounded insane out loud. The police arrived about 10 minutes later. They searched the woods, the perimeter, even the roof. They found nothing. No man, no flashlight, no explanation. Before they left, one officer told us something I still think about whenever I hear a noise at night. He said, "You're not the first people in this building to call about something at the windows." We didn't sleep that night. And a week later, management installed security lights behind the building. But whatever was out there already knew how to reach the second floor. This happened a couple years ago. My cousin and I thought it would be a good idea to bike out to an abandoned building about 30 minutes from our neighborhood. The ride there was honestly the best part. We took this long trail that cut through the woods. Sunlight was breaking through the trees, there were birds everywhere, and the air smelled clean and fresh. It didn't feel creepy at all. If anything, it felt peaceful. But the closer we got to the building, the more the atmosphere changed. The trees started looking thinner. The bright green leaves faded into this dull, almost sickly color. Some of the trunks were split, and they were rotting. The trail got quieter too. No birds and no wind. Just the sound of our tires crunching over gravel and twigs. I remember joking that it looked like the forest was dying around the building. Then we saw it. Through the trees, the building was covered in graffiti. Broken windows lining almost every wall, and parts of the roof looked collapsed. From the outside, it looked completely destroyed. It was around 3 p.m., broad daylight. That made us feel a lot safer, like nothing bad could happen in the middle of the day. We leaned our bikes against a small tree and locked them up. There were multiple no trespassing signs posted near the entrance, but like idiots, we ignored them. The front doors were boarded up, but a side entrance had the boards ripped off, so we walked in. Even though it was bright outside, the interior was dim. Sunlight barely pushed through the dirty windows. Dust floated in the air, visible in the light beams. The floor was covered in debris, old papers, broken ceiling tiles, and shattered glass. It smelled like mold and something metallic. We started walking through the first floor, peeking into rooms. Most of them were empty. Some still had rusted bed frames, overturned cabinets. But that's when we heard it. A footstep, a single footstep, from a nearby room down the hall, like someone walked across some debris. We both froze. "Did you hear that?" my cousin whispered. Before I could answer, there was another footstep, the same exact sound. We looked at each other for a second, then slowly walked towards the room the sound came from. My heart was pounding. I just kept telling myself it was just an animal, maybe a raccoon. We turned a corner, but the room was empty, completely empty. There was no open windows and no movement, just broken tiles and graffiti on the walls. We stood there listening. Nothing. We both laughed it off, but it wasn't a real laugh. A few minutes later, we heard something else. Music. It was faint at first, like an old radio playing somewhere upstairs. It sounded distorted, static mixed with a melody. I couldn't make out the song, but it sounded old. It was definitely coming from the second floor. We looked at each other again, and without saying anything, we both started towards the staircase. Each step creaked loudly as we climbed. Halfway up, the music got slightly louder, then it abruptly stopped. We reached the top floor. There was silence. We checked every room, empty hospital beds, rusted equipment, torn curtains hanging from the ceiling rails, but no radio, no speaker, and no phone, nothing that could have made that sound. That's when the feeling changed. It wasn't exciting anymore. It felt unsettling. We decided to head back downstairs and check one more section before leaving, and that's when we heard the loudest sound yet. A massive bang. It came from a room at the end of the hall, like a metal door being slammed as hard as possible. This made both of us jump. There was no way that was an animal. We slowly walked towards the room, my legs feeling heavy, like my body didn't want to go any further. When we reached the doorway, we hesitated, then looked inside. It was empty. Once again, no swinging door, no broken window, and nothing out of place. At that point, we were done. We turned around and walked straight out of the building. After that third incident, we didn't want to stick around. The second we stepped back into the sunlight, it felt like we can breathe again. We grabbed our bikes and didn't stop pedaling until we were far away from that place. Later that night, curiosity got the better of us. We looked up the building's address. It turns out it used to be a hospital. It shut down in the early 1980s after a series of investigations. Apparently there was multiple reports of patients claiming they heard footsteps in empty hallways at night. Some said they heard music playing in their rooms when no radios were present. But this is the part that stuck with me. In 1978, a nurse reported hearing loud banging from one of the less used wings of the hospital. Security checked that area. They found nothing. But 2 days later, a patient from that same wing disappeared, and they never found him. There were also rumors that one of the doctors had been running unauthorized experiments on terminally ill patients in a basement, keeping them isolated for extended observations. Records from that time were mysteriously lost in a small electrical fire in the storage room. The hospital shut down not long after. Some people online claimed the building was demolished, but it clearly wasn't because we were just inside. And here's what still bothers me. When we heard everything, it happened in the exact same order described in these old reports. Footsteps in the hallway, music from above, then banging from a sealed off room. That same pattern. I don't know if someone was in there with us, or if something else was, but I'm glad we didn't stay long enough to find out.